Well, it's great to see you. When we met last in Miami, we discussed how difficult it is to get in shape for those kinds of roles. But now that I've seen it, it was quite important to her posture and the way she stands and her body language. Tell us a little bit more about how you approach Psylocke.
Psylocke, to me, was my favorite character in the X-Men universe, and I actually didn't realize how important the physical aspects were to just standing as Psylocke, just to simply be Psylocke. I'd already been, training and working out prior to getting the role, and then the weeks leading up to going out to Montreal to begin shooting, I upped my workouts by double, but still, it wasn't quite the same as when I decided to fully take on all of the training for the fight scenes when I got to Montreal. Once I started training and doing all of the taekwondo and the sword and the wire work, my whole body transformed. It felt so much, to feel so strong and capable without having to do anything, just by simply standing. It really was a big factor in how I felt as the character, and that was really, it was a very, as an actor too, it was a very eye-opening experience of how much, physically,
exactly,
it matters. A lot of times you think, as actors, you think, as long as you can create it in your mind, you can be that. But the way that your body stands, the way that you feel so confident when you feel so strong and capable, and that definitely comes out.
And it's both with the X-Men, because they have so much backstory to them. There's so much subtext to what they're all about, and it's physical at the same time. So how interested were you in the X-Men universe as well, diving into it yourself?
Well, I grew up loving X-Men world, and I loved Psylocke, especially when Simon Kinberg, the producer and writer, told me that they were offering me Psylocke. I was so excited. I said, are you going to start with her as a twin? Is it before she goes bad? Are you showing that she's telekinetic and telepathic? And he was like, she's telepathic? I was like, yeah. You didn't know this? And so I always loved Psylocke, and getting to play her was a great honor. And then going in and being able to do the training and the fight scenes was a really exciting thing. And in the movie, they were able to put so many great things, but I feel like, knowing what we shot, there's probably still about 70% of the fight scenes that aren't in there, and it would be great, I think, to edit the whole just the fight scene together, just of Psylocke, just to put out for fans to see.
Well, you do get to see how much of a kick-ass she is, so that's good.
They were really good.
Do you remember your feeling on the first fitting of what her costume was going to be? Because that was quite spectacular as well.
Thanks. Yeah, the first fitting was just for latex. It was having to test what kind of latex my body responds to the best, and make sure I'm not allergic. But it's a really cool feeling. Everybody was so specific. There's an expert for everything. There's a latex person, there's a corset person, there's a shoe person, there's a sword person, there's a harness person, there's a corset person. So everybody does their specific thing. And then when we were about finished, we only had a couple weeks before I was supposed to go out to Montreal. I was brought in at the very end. My character was the last to be brought into the movie. And because of time, the costume of Psylocke was going to just be black with a purple sash as a tribute to her being purple. But when I found that out, the costume designer said, she would have loved for it to be like in the comics, but for time and money, it just wasn't possible unless the director, Bryan Singer, okayed it. So I called Bryan and gave him my big plea of this is Psylocke, she's she has an iconic look, she's got iconic purple hair, this is her outfit, the sash is red, it's not purple, please. And to his credit, he didn't blink an eye and said okay. And the really cool thing about the costume was there's a guy who has painted all of the Psylocke figurines from the beginning of time, all the dolls, and there's a special gradient of dark blue to purple, and to get the Psylocke costume just right, they brought in the guy who's been painting all the Psylocke dolls for all these years. He came in to do the life-size Psylocke dolls, so that was really cool.
That's the thing about the X-Men project. It's fans doing what they love, and this is what I think makes them so special. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, this one, it was to me, I kept saying, we have, I kind of felt like a fan who's like a mole who's gotten in and trying to see what I can do and push through. Thankfully, I can tell everybody from being on the inside that the director and producers, everybody, they focus on what the fans want, and that's a really big consideration in everything we do. And when Simon Kinberg Kimberg and I were talking about the fighting scene, he knew that my knowledge of Psylocke, that she was a very powerful opponent. And then Bryan Singer was really great because he kept talking about fan expectation, that once we started shooting and then there was a fan response and then him hearing about it, he knew it's important to get the fight scenes right for Psylocke and give me all the time that I wanted to train and all that. So it was really cool to see how much the people who are creating this world care about what the fans think.